I'll just start out. I'm Karin Klein. I'm a founding partner of Bloomberg Beta. We're a seed stage fund. Come on out, guys. And we focus on the future of work. And one of the most important trends that we're seeing is around machine intelligence. I'm curious, just to get things started, by a show of hands, aside from the few panelists that we heard earlier today, how many of you have heard AI mentioned in the last week or seen it in your news feed? By show of hands, right? Exactly. I mean, it's a really important trend, and that's part of the reason why I'm so excited about this group here today. Why don't you guys start out and share a little bit about who you are and what your companies do?
Sure. Thanks, Karin. I'm Drew Conway, founder and CEO of Illuvium. Illuvium puts machine learning to work for complex industrial operations, but I can tell you more about specific examples as we go through.
Hey guys, Todd, I'm the CTO of BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed's a global news and entertainment platform. We're present in a large number of countries and platforms of various media types. We collectively do about 8 billion content views a month and have a couple 100 million uniques. My job is just to keep things moving on the creative side, tools for creators, and make sure that we can build consumer experiences that people love.
Hi, my name is Babak Hodjat. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sentient Technologies. We're a San Francisco-based company. We have a platform that we've built that uses scaled AI, and we use that scaled AI to build products and disrupt, to use an overused word, different industries, from trading to what we call intelligent commerce to digital media optimization. So hopefully I'll sell BuzzFeed my third product. We'll see where it goes.
And so as you can see, we have some really brilliant data scientists and executives here today. And the thought was, we're hearing so much about this term, but it's hard to know necessarily what it means and how to potentially apply it to your business. So that's what we're going to focus on, is the opportunities around AI and machine intelligence. And Babak, to start out, why don't you define for us a little bit about what AI is?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny. We're in an industry where the first question is always, so what is it? You know, kind of define it. And there are many definitions for AI. The one that I use is tools and algorithms that are inspired by human intelligence and or natural intelligence. And AI is usually used for decision making, either building models that we then use to make decisions ourselves as humans or augment our decision making. It can also be used to actually do the decision making itself and then run through that feedback loop of observing the consequences of the decision and making new decisions as well. So AI can also be used autonomously, and especially in areas where the frequency of decision making is pretty high. You know, it's often better to allow the AI to make the decisions than to inject the human in the loop. So there are both types of application areas.
Anything that you'd add to add a little more color on how you guys think about machine intelligence?
I mean, I would agree with all that. I think, you know, I would maybe more practically from our end, you know, and what we do, I just sort of think of kind of data as being this fundamental prerequisite, that it's effectively learning from data, that you know, these are methods and algorithms and techniques where you have some input and there's a system designed to support decision making through a refinement of that information.
And Todd, how does BuzzFeed leverage machine intelligence?
Oof. In a few different ways. I would say we definitely lean more towards the augmentation side than the autonomous side. I think there are definitely places where things are a bit more autonomous and systems that need to run online or what have you. But you know, by way of example, I mentioned we have editorial bureaus in countries all around the world. We have editions in different countries in different languages. We have platforms that vary from post formats to video formats to things in between, social media platforms, as you can imagine. And I think one of our challenges, like at scale, is if we see something that works in one city, in one bureau, something resonates with an audience, maybe it's locally, maybe it's in a particular country, how do we know if that thing is worth translating to another environment? If something like takes off in Japan, is that translatable to the United States? Is it translatable to the French edition, what have you? Somewhat similarly, if something works as a Pinterest post, is that translatable to an actual post or a video format, what have you? Systems like that, we err very strongly towards humans in the loop. That is to say, we have systems that are based off of straightforward models and augmented by heuristics that kind of essentially fire off conditions to people. So the destination, the output of the work of those systems is not autonomous in nature. We are not translating things on the fly. There's too much nuance and understanding around things that travel in certain directions. So the output is delivered to the creator to make that decision and then to provide the start to that feedback loop.
So when you say humans in the loop, that means that essentially the technology platform shares what's really popular, and humans, how are they interacting with the data that they're receiving?
It's not just things that are popular, but it might be based on particular features or categories that we think are interesting or potentially have been translatable in the past. Like there are certain categories or types of content, emotional content, if you were, that tend to resonate, but those can be trickier in translation. Sometimes they might rely on cultural expectations that are different in different audiences in different countries. So it becomes very difficult to model those with a sufficient confidence not to have a creative, empathetic human be the arbiter of that.
So the humans are still important.
The humans are extremely important, and I think the key there is more than that, is that system informs and trains and can help people validate their instincts or reorient them.
And Drew, I mean, I'm also fascinated by your business. I'd love to hear more about, or maybe you could share an example about how you work with, industrial or traditional companies.
Yeah, and I think if there's been a unifying theme through the afternoon is that humans in the loop is still very fundamental and core to how sort of positive externalities come from machine learning and AI. And for us, it's the core of our business is supporting and augmenting the decision maker. And so, in a sort of generalized way, we kind of think about industrial operations as kind of existing in three concentric kind of loops of decision making. You have all the way at the edge, so a specific example would be an oil refinery. So you have some big complex operation, thousands and thousands of machines operating, lots and lots of data, and you have individuals there whose primary kind of relationship with that data is to kind of react and record it. So something's changing, we need to get things back on track. As you move further out from that, you have individuals who are really meant to observe larger portions of it. So you can sort of imagine a control room, maybe not physically co-located with an oil refinery, that is managing many refineries over a large geographic region. The way that we interact with that is our core kind of metric and products speak to stability. We want to help operations and industries achieve stability through real-time machine learning. So how do you take massive sensor data as well as historical data to inform an operator about how stable that actual kind of machine is running or multiple machines are running? And so to do that, you have to both serve the human operator to alert them when things become unstable, but as both Todd and Babak have said, the core is really, the machine is not a perfect observer of that information. So could just be that it's Thursday morning and Bob gets up and changes the control settings, and that's totally normal, happens every day, but the machine doesn't know that. So the system has to be able to be open to learning from that, and that's really kind of the the sort of the bedrock of how we can interact and build products for our customers.
It's really cool that you can tell through the data when a machine's going to break down, and then help the operator figure out how to provide the maintenance on that. And one of the reasons why I loved having all three of you guys is because you each have very different businesses. Babak, I'd love to hear more about how Sentient potentially helps a different type of customer than a BuzzFeed or someone that Illuvium would work with.
Sure. So Sentient is a product company, in that we only have 3 products. But I guess if the question is how do we approach going into a new product area, yeah, it's about identifying those points where decisions are being made and how those decisions can be automated. And often they can, and often they should. I mean, just to provide a little bit of a counterexample, in trading, for example, in self-driving cars, for example, we actually do want to automate where we can. And it's beneficial. Taking the human out of the loop in those areas often makes it repeatable. And we can log what's happening, so we can have a history of, for example, if there was a car crash, what happened leading up to it. Often the barrier becomes who do we punish if there was a mistake, rather than whether or not, in fact, taking the human out of the loop was beneficial as a whole. So yeah, I mean, going back to your initial question, I believe today AI is very similar to 30 years ago computing. For those of you who remember back then, personal computing becoming cheap and prevalent, everybody was looking at computerizing their enterprises. And they were going out and actually they had computer departments whose task was to, bring in this new technology and computerize. Today, it's laughable. Every single one of us are computer users. We carry, one around with us every day, and we're using it for computing purposes. So I think that's the trajectory that we are going to go down. Today, it's very difficult for an enterprise to go off and use the tools that are available out there and apply it, for example, to large data sets that they've collected and build an AI-enabled solution. It's because the technology is still not there, the tool set is not there, and the capability to build those solutions isn't quite there yet. But I think that is the trajectory we're going down, and the pervasiveness of this technology is certainly analogous to how computing and then the internet became pervasive.
So will one of you guys tell us a little bit more, I mean, talking about it and likening it back to the computer, when we were starting to change the last cycle. I'm curious if if somebody in the audience wanted to begin to use machine intelligence or AI in their businesses, what do you need to have in place in order to do that? Like, what on the resources side, the team side, how would you guys go about thinking about that?
Well, I can certainly answer it. Just if you wanted to be a customer of ours, for example, you have to have two things. You have to have data, right? And as an organization, that's a sort of for many, in particularly in our case, kind of large, say, non-traditional software, buyers. That's not a non-trivial question to answer. Do you have a full catalog and understanding of like what data you actually have? And the second piece is, do you have a question that you actually want to investigate with that data? Because as Babak was just saying, there's a million different methods and tools and products that you can buy, and before
it's quite overwhelming.
Yeah, and in fact, we get asked this question all the time. We'll talk to an executive at a large organization, and they'll typically have some flavor of, we're really just trying to understand what machine learning AI can actually do for our business. What does it actually mean for us? And apologies to previous presenters, but I think there's some backlash against kind of bringing in a consulting group to kind of tell them that. I think there's been a cycle in which there's been a dissatisfaction with the results of that. So now I actually want to see, well, what is a product that you can deliver for me that is repeatable, scalable in my business? And if you can have those things together, then there's, now it becomes a matter of, well, go out and find something that works.
Drew, does that wind up looking a lot like, I don't know, an exercise in cultural anthropology on your end when you're walking in the door? Because oftentimes people have the question that they think they want an answer to, but as you well know, depending on the tool and the system you have at your disposal, like they might wind up with very different results than expected.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And for us, it's interesting sitting on the other side of the table. Cultural anthropology can sometimes be customer disqualification exercise, right? So, if you have to go through this process of kind of plumbing the line all the way down, it can be hard for us to provide value. But as a much smaller company than either of yours, we have gone through this process of trying to kind of figure out how to ask the right questions, get to that kind of core thing that resonates for an organization. I think one of the things that we do in terms of just something as simple as predictive maintenance, that is a highly salient problem, right? So it's good to have something that you can kind of hang your hat on.
And Todd, one of the things you were relatively recently, promoted to CTO of BuzzFeed. I'm curious, early in the job, what were some of the things about the organization that occurred to you? What kind of systems and culture? You mentioned like a culture of experimentation that was in place.
Sure. A few things. So I think BuzzFeed in its DNA, at its core, like long before I was at the company, was built around experimentation. The founder has a background from IBM and MIT Media Lab. So like there is inherent, like outside of technology at all, there's an inherent like spirit of experimentation. And that's kind of been codified in the culture as what we look at as the feedback loop, which is we empower people throughout the organization, conduct experiments as many as possible, as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, depending on how that's achievable. Collect all the data that you can, and then and rinse and repeat, take the results of that and continue to iterate. That happens at a human level, and so on the technology side, our job winds up being helping people get signal from the things that they're doing so that they can make better decisions. And sometimes that's distilling very, very a lack of data that is direct and inferring things, or it's taking less granular data and analyzing it to pull it out. But we have large teams that are specifically dedicated to pulling signal out of those systems and making it easier to conduct that feedback loop very tightly.
And Babak, can you share a little bit more about how AI can help us save or make money? I got to drive in the ROI on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. There is a lot of legacy when you go into these companies. Companies have put a lot of money into actually collecting data, which we thought they think that someday is going to be useful to them. One application of AI is just unleash this machine learning against this data set, and maybe it'll find things that we can't find in there already. And so I think that's the first inclination of many companies out there, but what they miss out is that feedback loop that Todd was talking about right now, which is, okay, if we find something, we need to put it out there and verify whether it works, and then get more feedback. And that more feedback that we're getting is much more relevant because it's out there against your users now versus users you've had over the last 15, 20, 30 years. So it's not just the ROI on the data that you've collected, but I believe that it provides efficiencies and improvements to your decision-making cycles going forward into the future. And so I believe that we should not restrict AI only to the model building aspect. One of the reasons why AI is enjoying this hype cycle right now is this breakthrough that we've had around deep learning, neural networks, rebranded as deep learning. Great rebranding. They're just neural networks with many, many more hidden layers. And the fact is that they do allow us in many applications to do exactly that and unleash it on the data set and have it cluster your data set and find patterns, often nonlinear, that might not come very easily. It is very expensive to do so. It takes, our best deep learning models today are as good as the number of processing nodes, GPUs, that we can throw at it in a single data center fully connected. So only the big guys can build those big models, and when you build them, you build one, and it's more or less static. So you need to make sure that you take those models, put them out there in the real world, and have that decision loop optimize those models as you go forward. Just very quickly, one example is we do this we call intelligent commerce. Effectively, we take the AI, this deep learning magic, and we apply it to the inventory of images of, say, shoes or sunglasses, whatever that you're selling. And it perceives those and extracts features out of them very similarly to humans. But that alone is not enough. You do then need to have this online learning aspect that sits on top of this clustering that you've built that allows the users to navigate and get to what they're looking for. So often when we go out and try to sell this to big retailers or brands and so forth, they really like it. They go, wow, this is really cool. Within 2 or 3 clicks, I'm getting to what I need to go. But can you use all this data that I've collected too from people that bought this, also bought this other thing and so forth? Yeah, we can use that data, but it's secondary. The immediate context of the user is much better a determinant of what they're looking for than all of that data from 10, 15 years ago that you've collected and modeled.
So we're running a little short, unfortunately, because I'd love to hear more. So it's crystal ball time. So what kind of trends and emerging capabilities should we anticipate will be, ahead for us related to this type of technology?
I'll take a first swing. Sure. I think the immediate trend will be kind of fits and starts in terms of how things actually succeed and fail in practice. And actually, if we had more time, I think the biggest topic that we could really dig into in a separate panel is just trust. And I think there will be a kind of a moment in which large industries and applications kind of achieve that trust for the augmentation and decision making that they're going to help, and you can start to, industries that we don't work in, whether it's medicine or we've had a lot of discussion about kind of judicial applications. There is a moment in which we will probably breach that, and that has nothing to do with technology, really.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting with Paul talking earlier about responsible AI. I mean, trust is definitely one of those aspects we got to, figure out and ideally reach.
I couldn't agree more. I would say, like, kind of doubling down on that, like, you have this early in a cycle, like, there's the notion of AI as panacea, right? And you're trying to figure out what it can and can't do, and so at that point in time, it can do everything. And I think it'll start to crystallize a bit, and it'll become very obvious where the points of leverage are, and people will be able to have a much more, honest conversation without using the term tongue-in-cheek, as they do now.
The problem of expectation is a problem that goes hand in hand with AI. In a past life, I have some experience with conversational systems. We don't just expect it to be intelligent within the domain that it's supposed to be intelligent in. And we don't even just expect it to be as intelligent as humans, not even as intelligent as all of humanity. We expect it to be, know the future and know everything that hasn't even been invented yet and so forth. That problem of expectation is there. In fact, oftentimes when we have user-studied our systems, when we put an avatar in front of it and say, talk to the AI, and the AI is going to be your intermediary for this particular application area, the user experience is deteriorated. So my crystal ball says that AI is going to shine where it's not called AI. It's actually in the background, and in a subtle way, it's making the applications better and smarter. And where we do call it AI, I think it's going to disappoint, as it has in the past as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly, being at Bloomberg Beta, a lot of people from companies reach out to us and ask us how they can apply these technologies if we're seeing startups that can potentially work with them. And one thing I would encourage everyone, as you've heard here today, there's a lot of opportunity there, and it's worth experimenting, especially if you have the data and you have a problem that you want to solve. Start learning from this because it has some great potential, whether we call it AI or machine intelligence or something else. Anyway, I'd love to thank all of you for being with us here today and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.